My op-ed today over at HartmanReport.com is titled "The Great American Tariff Scam," starring Donald Trump as the savior who sells you out. It was written by Greg Palast, my old friend, our former BBC reporter. In addition to being a brilliant journalist, he's also an economist, with an actual degree, and has done work for the Steelworkers Union and other groups for over the years. Greg, welcome back to the program. So give us, set this thing up for us. What is the main premise of this article that you wrote today that we published?
Well, we got this tariff game is a terrible con job. And unfortunately, it's the steelworkers who are paying the price. Now, you think, steelworkers, the tariffs have gone up this week to 50% on steel and aluminum. They were already at 25%. And Trump did his sickening photo op. You've got the hard hat, the guys in the hard hats in front of coils of steel. And he says, "I've saved your jobs." Well, here's the facts, buddy. Since you raised the tariffs through the roof, imports have gone up 3.6% over the Biden administration last year. So imports are up despite massive tariffs. Production, right? The whole point of this is to have more steel made in America. It's gone down since you imposed your tariffs. Worse, prices have gone up by more than a third, 38.5%. That is stunning. What don't we have in America that isn't made out of steel or aluminum? And what's been the result? And here's the terrible thing. Total employment in the steel industry is completely flatlined. In fact, a study done for the Defense Department says if it weren't for the $1 trillion infrastructure program from Biden, these tariffs would have caused steel employment to drop. Cleveland-Cliffs has announced that it's laying off 1,200 steelworkers shortly. This is their response to Trump's tariffs. By the way, that comes out to understand how important steel is in our economy. You're talking about price inflation. According to Yale University studies, the average American family will pay $2,800 this year because of steel and aluminum imports if they stick all year. And so it's the steel workers who are taking it in the neck. And I wanted to mention, as you said, I was I used to have a job, which was to be an economist and an investigative economist. And the Steelworkers Union came to me back in 1977 and said, should we support these tariffs against Japanese steel? They're taking all our jobs. I said, well, I'll look into it. And what I found out that the higher the tariff, the fewer jobs in steel. You raise those tariffs. Now, how does that happen? It just doesn't make any sense, right? You raise the price on foreign steel, like from Canada, and supposedly that should lead us to have more jobs in the United States. But what happens is greed. As soon as you eliminate competition from foreign sources, American steel companies raise their prices through the roof. As I said, so far, up 38.5%. That's more than a third. That's devastating to our economy. And it's devastating to the steelworkers because when you raise prices by that massive amount, you don't sell as much steel. General Motors, for example, will simply replace steel with plastic, or they will stop making their minimal margin cars. They just sell fewer cars. Why does this happen? Because steel company bosses, their owners, which right now are mostly hedge fund managers, that the steel company bosses are not in the business of making steel. They're in the business of making profits, and their profits have shot through the roof. So the tariffs are all about enriching these guys. In fact, this is the weirdest one, Tom. The Department of Defense issued a report, and it is titled, and I kid you not, this Department of Defense, Trump's tariffs enrich steel barons. That's the official report from the Department of Defense. Now, I assume that Hegwitch has gotten rid of the author of that study. But and who are they? For example, Dan Loeb of Third Point, a vulture investor we should all be afraid of. And he seized a big hunk of United States steel. And one of the tragic things is that Trump went to the U.S. Steel plant to U.S. Steel mill in Pennsylvania and declaring, I've saved your jobs. Well, guess what? He said he saved his jobs because he cut a deal with Nippon Steel, the Japanese company, to come in and invest $14 billion. First of all, he's not the savior. He killed that deal, which, by the way, was bargained by a senator named John Fetterman. He's a Democrat, I've heard. Now, Fetterman pushed Nippon Steel to commit to a $14 billion makeover of these old steel mills. We have ancient steel mills that ought to be in the Smithsonian because the asset strippers wouldn't put in a penny. But Fetterman worked with Nippon Steel to get them to agree to put in $14 billion. Trump vetoed the deal. He killed the deal. He killed the jobs that were going to be created. He killed those jobs. And then he flips around and claims that he did the Nippon deal, not Fetterman, and he saved everyone's job. It's like an arsonist saying, oh, I put out the fire and I caught the guy that burnt down the building. It's me, but, hey, give me credit. So what Trump is doing is enriching steel barons, asset strippers, vulture investors, not giving a damn about what actually happens on the shop floor. We're losing 1,200 workers right now at Cleveland Cliffs Mills. This is what he's doing is an American tragedy, and it's a con job. It's a total con job.